Greetings and salutations, and welcome back to the Brahma Bulletin. Today, we're going to talk about our Week 4 matchup against the Seattle Sea Dragons. Now, both teams are 1-2. Seattle got their first victory of the year last week when they beat the Vegas Vipers in a come from behind fashion, in pretty exciting fashion as well. And our beloved Brahmas, well, we lost to the Houston Roughnecks. Pretty tough fashion. And, well, we've talked about that in a previously, so we don't have to reopen old wounds. So, moving along, we are playing Seattle this week. This is the last of a 3-game road trip. A long 3-game road trip. So, finally get done with this. Next week, we go back to the friendly confines of the Alamo Dome. So let's get into this week against the Seattle Sea Dragons. Now, if you're a betting person, looking at the lines here, according to DraftKings, it looks like they have Seattle as a 4.5 favorite, and the over-under in the game is 40.5. So take that with you. I'm sure these lines will change as the days go on and we get closer to the game. Looking at the injury report, as of right now, the do not practice list, we have defensive end Mike Scott out with or not out, but did not practice because of a hamstring. Defensive end Delonte Scott was out for a head injury. Wide receiver TJ Vasher had a shoulder injury, and offensive lineman Chidi Okeke had an ankle injury. Limited in practice, we only had one, and that was wide receiver Jalen Tolliver with a groin injury. So hopefully it's nothing too serious for any of these players, and they can be cleared to play come Saturday. Remember, this is a Saturday game, not Sunday, and it is a late game, like 9 o'clock Central Time. So hopefully he gets a rest before the game so you can stay up and watch the whole thing. Okay, so I have 3 keys to victory. Number 1, oh boy, the Brahma Bulldozers. We have got to do something about our offensive line. Our offensive line needs to improve. I know that coming into the XFL, offensive lineman and quarterback was going to be the 2 big things for any team to be successful. And sure enough, our offensive line is not doing so well. They need to plow holes for our running game. We did have the top running game for 2 weeks, but that has significantly dropped off these last 2 weeks against Orlando and last week against Houston. Our running game has basically been non-existent, and we need to get that back on track. Also, Jack Cohn has been under a lot of pressure so far this year. Hasn't been sacked as many times as other quarterbacks have, but still, he's under pressure. You can see he's scrambling around, and last week against Houston, there were several times where he dropped back and just threw the ball at the offensive line almost immediately to avoid being sacked. He was only sacked one time, but he was running for his life for most of the game, and so our offensive line needs to get that fixed. Number 2, and this is going to be very crucial, we need to stop Ben DiNucci. This guy he's on fire. There's no other way to put it. He's leading the league in pretty much every single passing category you can think of. Passing attempts, passing completions, passing yards, passing touchdowns, passing quarterback rating. Everything you can think of, he's leading it. You remember PJ Walker back in the 2020 version? Well, of course you did. If you're an XFL fan, of course you remember PJ Walker. You remember how he was like the face of the league and was the early favorite to win MVP before the season got cut short. Well, Ben DiNucci is on that trajectory. He is quickly becoming the face of the league, and he's probably the early favorite to win MVP. The guy is just unstoppable right now. So we need to slow him down at least. I don't think we can stop him, but we need to at least slow them down. Now, as well as Ben DiNucci has been doing, he has been prone to throw some interceptions, so maybe that might be our key to victory within this key. All right, number 3, offensive coordinator Jamie Elizondo needs to call a better game. You and I and everybody else out there know what happened toward the end of the game last week against Houston. We had 1st and goal at the 1. 1st and goal at the 1, and we couldn't score a touchdown. That still aggravates me to no end. You know what the definition of insanity is? When you keep doing something over and over and over and expecting a different result. Well, you know what? I think Jamie Elizondo was insane last week. He kept calling for a running play and like in the same spot. I mean, you have wide receivers that are like 6'4", going up against cornerbacks that are smaller than that. You have your big tight end Elise Mack, who has been basically Jack Cohen's safety blanket. You could have run to the opposite side. Instead of running down the middle, you could have pitched to the left, pitched to the right. Something, anything different, please, for the love of God. Anyways, I don't want to get too worked up, but yes, we all know what happened. He needs to make better calls. And it's not like he's a rookie offensive coordinator. He was the Vegas Vipers offensive coordinator in the 2020 version of the XFL. And I remember watching on those games, and Tampa Bay started off very sluggishly for like the first 2 weeks. And then around week 3, week 4, that's when things started clicking. And if I'm not mistaken, they did end up leading the league in offense before the season was cut short. So I'm hoping that happens to us, that it just takes some time. Well, I'm not going to say that. It just took some time for us to click and to gel, because remember there was no preseason, so there wasn't that time to really get to know each other. So maybe the Brahmas are one of those teams that just take a little bit of time to gel. So fingers crossed. All right, looking at some stats here. Well, as I mentioned, Ben DiNucci is leading the league in basically every single passing category. I mean, when it comes to passing yards, passing touchdowns, the completion percentage, passer rating, everything. Leading the league at 855 yards of passing. His passing yards per attempt is tops in the league at 7.1. He's also leading the league in touchdowns with 7. He does have 3 interceptions, which is also in the top of the league. His quarterback rating is also tops at 98.4. So when it comes to offense, the guy he's the man. There's no question about that. Rushing leaders, remember, Kalen Ballage was the leading rusher for the first 2 weeks. Well, that's no longer the case. Right now, it is Morgan Ellison for the Seattle Sea Dragons that is leading the league in rushing yards with 170 yards. And Kalen Ballage is 4th with 142 yards. Now, when it comes to average yards per carry, once again, Morgan Ellison is leading the league with 5.67 yards per carry. And our boy, Kalen Ballage, is way, way, way down there. He is not even in the top 10 with a 3.09 yards per carry. It's funny that Jack Cohen has actually got more yards per carry than Jacques Patrick and Kalen Ballage, so that's kind of sad. And when it comes to rushing touchdowns, we have, John Hillman and Jacques Patrick are tied for second in the league with only 1, so that's not really saying a whole lot there. So, like I said, rushing used to look like it was going to be our bread and butter after week one. Not so much right now. When it comes to receiving leaders, well, Seattle has the top two receivers in yards with the Ja'Cour Pearson and Josh Gordon. Remember Josh Gordon from the NFL? Yep. So both of those guys are tearing it up. So Pearson has 272 yards receiving, and Josh Gordon has 225. Looking at the list, we don't have anybody in the top 10. You got to go way down there to get to Elise Mack when he has 84 yards receiving. And he's our top receiver. Quite a disparity when it comes to that. And when it comes to receiving touchdowns, Seattle, Josh Gordon is tied for the first in the league with 3 touchdowns. And, well, Fred Brown and Elise Mack and Jalen Tolliver, they're tied for like third with 1. So receiving core, not so much. And we do remember that preseason, before the season started, it was reported and said by many that our receiving core was not going to be our strength. And so far, it's looking to be, they're right about that. Offensive ranks when it comes to yards per game, well, take a wild guess who's number 1. You got it, Seattle Sea Dragons, averaging 383 yards per game. And our beloved Brahmas, we are second to last. We are only averaging 232 yards per game. Only Arlington is worse than us. So, offensively, we're kind of anemic. Rushing yards per game, Seattle is actually behind San Antonio. Look at that. The Brahmas are number 2 in the league. We are averaging 292 rushing yards per game, and Seattle is 297. So actually they are tied with each other for number 2 when it comes to rushing yards per game. Now, passing yards per game, that's the Seattle Sea Dragons with 852 passing yards. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm going to click passing yards per game. Yep, still, anyways, Seattle Sea Dragons still number 1 with 284 passing yards per game. And our Brahmas are 6 with 133 passing yards per game. So, again, offensively, we are pretty anemic. Defensively, that was going to be our strength, right? Well, yards per game, we are 4th in yards per game. We were number 1 going into last week, but after Houston kind of ran rough shot over us, pretty bad. But anyways, after the Houston game, we have now dropped to 4th in the league at 261.3 yards allowed per game. Luckily, Seattle is right behind us at 264.7 yards per game that they're giving up. Now, rushing yards per game, our defense is kind of in the middle. We're 5th in the league, giving up 90.3 rushing yards per game. And St. Louis is giving up 124 yards per game, so they are second to last. So this is where I think the Brahma Bulldozers can do something and get our running attack back on track because Seattle is toward the bottom. All right, passing yards per game. Defensively, we are 3rd in the league. We're only giving up 171 yards passing per game, and the Sea Dragons are actually better than us at 160.7 yards per game in passing allowed. So defensively, we're kind of equal. Offensively, yeah, we're not even close. Seattle's basically blowing us out in almost every single category. So if we're going to win, it's going to have to be won in an offensive battle. So, time for my game predictions. And this is where I don't do so well. All right. Number 1, I believe that Jack Cohn will get back on track. And he's going to throw for 3 touchdowns. I know I just got done saying that our offense was putrid and hideous. and anemic. But I do believe that this is a good game for him to get back on track. I really believe in Jack Cohn. I really do. I think he's a good quarterback, and that's why I was so frustrated after last week's performance. It was just so aggravating and so frustrating. But I think that he can get back on track here. We have to remember that Houston has perhaps the best defense in the league, so we got to give him some slack. Not a whole lot, but some slack for his performance. I think that the Sea Dragons are not super good defensively. They are sixth in the league in scoring defense, like I said, and I think that this will be a good opportunity for Jack Cohn to get back on track. Now, he doesn't need to pass for a lot of yards. He doesn't need to throw for 300 yards to win this game. He just needs to make the big plays when he has the opportunity and when he can. And I think he will make those big throws and he will hit the bullseye. Yeah, bad too. Anyways, at number 2, Kalen Ballage will have over 75 rushing yards. Now, I know this is a stretch because I have predicted it before, and so far, in the last 2 weeks, he rushed for 24 yards in week 2 and 36 yards last week. So, combined, the last 2 weeks, he hasn't even reached 75 yards. So, this is kind of a stretch by saying he's going to rush over 75 yards. Now, like I said, the Sea Dragons are 7th in the league in rushing defense, averaging about 124 yards rushing per game. So this is the perfect game for the Brahma Bulldozers to plow those holes for Kalen Ballage and get our running game back on track. I really hope so because Kalen Ballage has fallen off the radar. Like I said, he was number 1 leading the league going into week 2, and now just 2 weeks later, he's basically toward the bottom. All right, number 3, the defense will have 1 interception. They've had 2 interceptions, 1 in the last 2 games, and I think that they can double that. Now, as amazing as Ben DiNucci has been and all the wonderful things he's done offensively, he has thrown 3 picks, which is tops in the league. So this will be a good opportunity for us to pick him off at least twice, and I really do believe that's going to happen. And number 4, Delonte Scott will have 2 sacks. Now, the Brahmas are having no problems bull rushing the quarterback. They are toward the top in the league in sacks, and Delonte Scott is tied for the league lead, or tied for the team lead in sacks. So I think that, we are 3rd in the lead in sacks, as a matter of fact. And I believe that Delonte will get his 2 sacks this week. So, now for the moment that you've all been waiting for. Waited with bated breath, I'm sure. And that is going to be my final score prediction. Now, I believe this is going to be a high-scoring game. It's not going to be a defensive struggle. It's not going to be the Arlington Renegades and Orlando Guardians game where it's 10-9. I believe this is going to be a high-scoring offense. Ben DiNucci is the man. He's on fire. I don't think that we're going to stop him. I think we can only try to slow him down. Seattle, with their offense, is just almost scoring at will, so they're going to get theirs. They're going to get their points. They're going to get their touchdowns. The thing is, can our offense keep up with Seattle? Yes. Yes, I think they can. And yes, I think they will. I think that we will get back on track. I think Jack Cohn will duplicate his performance against the Guardians. Like I said, he doesn't need to throw for 300 yards. He most likely won't. But he just needs to hit his targets, make the big plays when they're there. He'll get his touchdowns. We'll keep up, I believe. And the Brahmas will emerge victorious 31-27. That's my prediction. And that does it for me. That's it for this episode. I think it's time for this Brahma to be put out to pasture. Well, at least until next episode. So until then, horns forward, San Antonio!